Another 7 football myths you still believe. Number 7. CR7 was the problem at Juventus. Right, so this myth thankfully isn't as prominent as it was a few years ago, given that Juventus' failures since Ronaldo's exit has actually made a lot of people see sense. But I'd be naive to think that there still aren't idiots around who still believe, or are pretending to believe to have something to hate about the least favourite player, that CR7 actually was the problem at Juventus. And well, I'm here to tell you that, much like many of these things you morons conjure up, this is and was always wrong from pretty much every angle. Let me explain.
Okay, so let's begin with the notion that Juventus apparently scored a lot more goals as a team without Ronaldo. Yeah, this is some horseshit that's been cooked up for 2 reasons. One, of course, it's pretty common among the keyboardians to hate on him. And 2, because of the Bianconeri's domestic goal tally in the 17-18 campaign. Because you see, in the season prior to Ronaldo joining Juve, the club amassed a total of 86 goals in the league, their highest tally for years. But here's the thing though, it was literally only that season. Because if you put 17-18 to one side, in the previous 3 years, Juventus averaged 1.96 goals per game in Serie A and 1.44 goals per game in the Champions League. Now compare it to CR7's 3 years donning the black and white. Juventus averaged, well, what do you know, 1.96 goals again in Serie A and 1.77 goals in the UCL. So, was Ronaldo the problem because Juve didn't reach the league goal tally of 17-18 during his time there? Or did you indeed study past the 5th grade and understand that that season was simply an outlier? Jesus. So now that we've put that stupid myth to bed, let's be grown-ups and talk about what actually happened to Juventus. So Ronaldo's first season in Turin was pretty standard stuff for the old lady. Back then, they were knocked out in the quarterfinals of the Champions League, again, while bagging Serie A, again. But this time with a significantly healthier points gap, no signs of decline there. But then it slowly began. So following the conclusion of 18-19, Juventus mutually parted ways with their manager Massimiliano Allegri after 5 years. And from then on, during Ronaldo's time there, the team went on to have 2 more managers in as many years. And while fans of teams like Real Madrid and Chelsea are probably looking at me sideways thinking, your point being? A club like Juventus going from the stability of having one figurehead for half a decade to the conveyor belt system similar to that of a Real Madrid or Chelsea was always going to cause problems, and lo and behold, it did just that. Having said that though, blaming Juventus' decline purely or even mainly on the managerial situation would be really unfair, because the truth is, this was just one of quite a few factors, and as far as what the biggest factor was, I'll address that later on in the video. But for now, let's stick to the topic of management. So despite following his predecessors by bringing Serie A home, Maurizio Sarri was sacked in August 2020 following Juve's exit from the Champions League. And as unfair as that was, for me he probably should have been sacked even before that for the brain dead business he did in his only transfer window by A, offloading young and exciting talent like Moise Kean, and B, and this is inexplicable to the point that it's diagnosable insanity, selling João Cancelo and paying an extra fee to City for Danilo. You sure there aren't anything funny in those cigarettes, mate? Though to be fair, if Sarri did have a redeeming quality, it may have just been his unselfishness, as he was clearly sharing his funny cigarettes with the Juventus board of directors since, following his departure, the club went on to make a decision which was almost as dumb as the purchase of Danilo. They handed the reign over to someone who's genuinely never managed anything in his life. Literally nothing. I mean, did they just take one look at Zizou's head shape and assume he was a f***ing mango? Cause you do know he doesn't actually grow on trees, right? This shit is very rare. So, with Juve now seemingly adopting the revolving door approach to managers, combined with their decision to hire someone with as much top flight coaching experience as me, much to the surprise of no one equipped with a brain, things began to go downhill even quicker than before. Call me crazy, but so far, I don't see how Ronaldo is to blame for any of this. Now, one thing Pirlo did do well though is get rid of a lot of deadwood and bring in a barrage of young talent. And while we will analyze the pros and cons of this in depth later on, for now this has conveniently brought me to the biggest factor behind Juve's downfall during the CR7 years. The old ladies, older men. Cause the truth is, Ronaldo joined Juventus during a time when the spine of that team were already on the wane. Players such as Chiellini, Bonucci, Mandzukic, Khedira, and even Buffon, all who were absolute stalwarts in at least one of the teams who reached 2 finals in 3 years, were all past 30 by CR7's arrival. But because not all were exactly over the hill just yet, Juve managed to maintain their Serie A success for a couple of seasons longer. Now just think about this logically for 1 second. If Ronaldo was indeed the problem, surely Juve would have relinquished the league in his first season there, considering they only topped Serie A the previous season by 4 points, and surely they'd have struggled through the group stages of the Champions League, considering they were rather unconvincing the previous season in a relatively straightforward group. But no, the arrival of Ronaldo not only increased Juventus' lead at the top of Serie A by another clear 7 points, it also led them to comfortably top what was probably the Champions League group of death of 18-19. It was only when this already aging team was truly on its final legs that the results also began falling off. And although Pirlo getting rid of deadwood was certainly a positive change, you know what usually happens when too much is gotten rid of at the same time at any club? Said club goes into transition, and subsequently it takes them at least a further couple of years to get back to where they were, which, as you can see now, is exactly what's happening with Juve. Again, nothing to do with Ronaldo. However, if you are still hellbent on blaming him and will find any excuse to do so, aka most of my audience, then no worries, I'll hook you up myself. So the Italian league for the better part of a decade up until 2018 was pretty much a monopoly, with Juve not only being the best team, but also the only big draw. But then enter CR7. Ronaldo's arrival brought significantly more eyes and in turn revenue for the entire league, and inevitably this increased the overall pulling power of the league, eventually leading teams around Juve to strengthen their own sides in order to compete with the old lady, which is basically what happened. Bad Ronnie. So yes, if you want to blame him for that, go ahead. On the other hand, if you haven't had the intelligence gene cut out of you, you'd have clocked by now that the decline of Juventus was something that was bound to happen sooner or later. Ronaldo being there was just a mere coincidence, just like it would have been at Real or Chelsea, 2 clubs currently in turmoil, 2 clubs he was linked to recently, and there is zero doubt on my mind that had he joined either of them, you tenaciously trying tiresome and tacky twitteristic teabagging toxic tits would have pointed all the blame on him for their shortcomings too, while those who live in the real world would have known that much like his stint with the Bianconeri, it would have just been the simple case of a man being in the right place in the wrong time.
Number 6. Sir Alex Ferguson was a no-nonsense disciplinarian. To be completely honest, the man himself has morphed into a myth since his masterful, memorable and immeasurably magical spell of managing Man U. News stories about his time at United emerge in what seems like a weekly basis, and with people like Patrice Evra claiming that he'd been arrested if he was managing today because he was too harsh, Rio Ferdinand recalling the time he made Ronaldo cry after a UCL away game, Ruud van Nistelrooy talking about being essentially kicked out of United after crossing him, and speaking of crossing, of course we all know what happened with Bex. These things kinda make Sir Alex Ferguson sound like a bit of a tyrant, a man who ruled with an iron fist. And That's the narrative the masses usually run with, not taking notes of stories from the other side. You see, Sir Alex Ferguson wasn't a no-nonsense boss who wouldn't budge for anyone. He was a brilliant man manager who was very open to change and alternate options. You don't last 27 years at a club and continue to win during that time if you're someone who refuses to evolve and is just merely stuck in his ways. He just knew when it was time to let things go and when he indeed should put his foot down. And for someone like Wayne Rooney to claim that Sir Alex wouldn't have tolerated Ronaldo walking out against Tottenham when he did in 2022, here are some stories that Wazza may be forgetting. Roy Keane was arrested for a bar fight on the eve of an FA Cup final. Sir Alex Ferguson stood by him. Rio Ferdinand missed a drugs test that led to an 8-month ban. Sir Alex Ferguson stood by him. Paul Scholes didn't turn up to a game on purpose cause, well, he's a bit of a weird person, ain't he? Nonetheless, Sir Alex Ferguson stood by him. Cristiano Ronaldo supported claims suggesting that he was enslaved by Manchester United. Sir Alex Ferguson stood by him. And for those wondering why I haven't mentioned the most obvious example of Eric Cantona Kung Fu kicking a fan, well, my friends, that would just open a new subsection altogether. Because that wasn't the only thing King Eric did, you see. He, by all accounts, in his 5 years in Manchester, did what he felt like when he felt like it. Search up the stories yourself. And yes, Sir Alex Ferguson stood by him. So no, with this man, it wasn't my way or the highway. It was more of, okay, have it your way, but motherfucker, you better back it up on Saturday. Number 5. Roberto Carlos was a GOAT level free kick taker. Greatest free kick of all time? Possibly. In fact, I'd argue it's up there as one of the greatest goals of all time, period. But here's the thing, as astonishingly brilliant that was, I do think this tiny tough tackling tree trunk fight tank toe punters twirling torpedo in Le Tournoi has somewhat inflated his free kick reputation, because while he has scored quite a few of them in his career, saying that they came far and in between would actually be somewhat of an understatement. And if you also want to expand the horizons a little bit, his set piece deliveries weren't really great either. So yeah, while he still has one of the greatest free kick highlight reels of all time, Roberto Carlos, unlike his overall game, just wasn't very consistent from dead ball situations. Number 4. Frank Lampard was just a goal scorer. I explained in a previous video of how Messi and Ronaldo being compared to each other has at times led to them both being underrated at separate times, but as we can see from this example, they aren't the only ones who suffered from this. And well, in all honesty, the comparisons to Stevie G has somewhat hurt people's perception of Frank Lampard, not necessarily because Stevie was better than him, but because Stevie was more present than him. That man was everywhere on a football pitch until Rafa came along and shifted him to the right. And yes, of course, Stevie in general was just more aggressive and more complete, but that does not mean Lamps was one-dimensional, people. Frank Lampard was a lot more than just goals from midfield. Lamps was also a world-class passer of the ball. I mean, for the stats merchant out there, the fact that he's 5th in the Premier League all-time assist charts above Gerrard should tell you at least something. He can also sit back and dictate play, had a sick final ball, and you know what actually wasn't bad defensively either, because you see the difference was, again, before Benitez arrived, Steven Gerrard basically just ran Liverpool's midfield how he wanted, and that's fine. Like, it does mean he'd average more sprints, touches, tackles and all that jazz, but it also meant that he was more prone to high profile errors. Do you remember? As for Lamps, as I said, defensively he was fairly decent, especially when playing for England in that rigid 4-4-2 alongside Gerrard. But for Chelsea during Mourinho's first stint, which people tend to vividly remember more than anything due to reasons I explained in yesterday's video, go watch it, Lamps played in a very solid structure where his role was purely attack orientated. He didn't need to defend as there was already someone in the Makelele role. This guy, whoever he is. But before, after, and as I said, also with the national team, Frank Lampard had all the attributes to be a world-class box-to-box midfielder of that time, as he was, and most of those attributes on the very top level. Number 3. Luis Suarez had the greatest season in Premier League history. So while the debate of the overall PL GOAT is usually split between Thierry Henry and Cristiano Ronaldo, when people are usually asked what the greatest individual season is, they a lot of the time point away from these guys and towards Luis Suarez's final campaign at Merseyside, the 2013-2014 season. Even though, the deeper you dig, the more you realize that that's just not true. Like, don't get me wrong, Suarez's 13-14 was very good. In fact, it was crazy good. Up there with the top 10 greatest individual campaigns in Premier League history. But was it in the top 4? Well, I guess it just depends on opinions and preferences, but get the f*** out of here. So Luis Suarez in the 13-14 season scored 31 goals and bagged 13 assists in 37 games. So yeah, statistically, he's certainly up there. But yeah, fuck it, let's whip out that board again. So of Chewy Charlie's 31 goals that season, less than 30% were against the top 10, meaning over 70% were against the bottom half. But that's not it, cause check this. Not only was over 70% against the bottom half, but over 50% were against the bottom 5. Yes, over half of the goals of the greatest individual season in Premier League history were against relegation fodder. Let that sink in. You done? Good, cause I'm not. Cause even outside the stats, bar the Christmas away time game at the Etihad, he was marked out / disappeared in pretty much every big game that season. Well, also maybe apart from the time they ran over Arsenal. Not gonna lie, that was funny. And let's not forget, he also played in 3 FA Cup ties and a League Cup tie, where his overall impact in the 4 games combined to total the staggering sum of the cube root of diddly twat. Also, he ate someone in the World Cup. So again, great season, yes. But is it up there with the all-time greats? Hold your horses. Number 2, Michael Owen the traitor. This is just sad. Michael Owen is apparently a snake for joining Manchester United. No, he's not. The man, almost from the very moment he left to go to Real Madrid, which, let's face it, is a chance very few in their right minds would turn down, wanted to come back to Liverpool every year, was turned down by them every year, suffered with injuries every day, and was basically written off at 29. But then, he magically got a call from arguably the greatest manager of all time saying he wanted him. Meaning he now had a choice between moving his family up and playing for relegation fodder Hull City, or playing for Premier League winners where he'll still get Champions League football, while also staying at home and establishing the type of stability he had an issue with in Madrid. Bro, that is a dream scenario. And you want him to turn that down because of his loyalty towards a club who've already turned him down multiple times? Be fucking real, man. And also, you realize players like Paulins, R9, Zlatan Ibrahimovic and so many others made similar moves while having a lot more choice. Yeah, they're adored. I mean, to me it makes zero sense, but I can only guess it's because those gentlemen are confident and charismatic people, while Owen tells stories about throwing apples in the bin. Don't be like that, kids. Be nice to nice people, not confident people. Nice people are good. Confident people are usually wankers. What? Number 1. The apparent giant gap between Messi and Ronaldo's World Cup careers. So I explained in yesterday's video why, despite Messi's win in 2022, Ronaldo still actually has the lead over him when it comes to head-to-head performances across 5 World Cups. It's 3-2 in my books. But of course, following Leo's win in Qatar, there's no question anymore on who has the bigger World Cup legacy. But even that gap isn't as big as people seem to think these days. And that isn't just because of Leo's World Cup win, but also the curious and oddly specific case of World Cup knockout goals. Because for one reason or another, and I'm pretty sure we all know what that reason is, despite this never having been mentioned anywhere before December 2022, winning a World Cup and scoring a World Cup knockout goal has now all of a sudden become extremely vital in GOAT debates. Ronaldo has never scored a World Cup knockout goal, they say, while Messi has 5. Yeah, but Messi didn't score a knockout goal in 4 of those tournaments either. Yeah, well, Ronaldo has never scored a knockout goal. Yeah, but one of Messi's goals was against Australia. Yeah, well, Ronaldo has never scored a knockout goal. Yeah, but Messi's last goal shouldn't have officially counted. Yeah, well, Ronaldo has never scored a knockout goal. Yeah, but the rest of Messi's goals were penalty. Will you stop making very good points? Ronaldo has never scored a knockout goal. Your average day on football Twitter, ladies and gentlemen. Because fact is, you can't argue with stats. Is what these brainless twats would say. But of course, the truth is you can. Not necessarily the authenticity, but certainly the validity. So today we are going to go through every World Cup knockout game Cristiano Ronaldo has played in, look closer into why he didn't manage to find the net, and, when applicable, compare this to the corresponding game Messi was involved in at the time. Let's roll on. 2006 last 16, Portugal 1, Holland 0. So for the younger viewers out there, this game actually has its own Wikipedia page. Title, The Battle of Nuremberg. A feisty evening that saw referee Valentin Ivanov dish out 16 yellow cards and 4 red cards. And personally, after watching Beck's curl one in against Ecuador earlier that evening, I was loving it. But guess who wasn't? Yup, Ronaldo was injured by Dutch defender Khalid Boulahrouz very early on and, despite trying to continue, eventually had to be substituted around the half-hour mark. And even then, somehow him not scoring in this knockout game is now used against him. Whereas, a day before that, Lionel Messi came off the bench to play for over 46 minutes against a much more defensively leaky Mexico side, injury-free, horror tackle-free, and still did f*** all. But of course, nobody remembers that. Next round, 06 quarterfinals, Portugal 0, England 0, and, well, that was about it. We were nice to them and let them play in the next round. Nothing else happened. F*** off, nothing else happened. So Ronaldo in this game was up against a backline of Neville, Ferdinand, Terry, Cole, with Owen Hargreaves sitting in front of them. Yep, and unsurprisingly, this side kept 4 clean sheets out of a possible 5 that tournament. And somehow Ronaldo's GOAT status is now questioned since he didn't score against this backline from the wing, despite still being the most dangerous player on his team for the entirety of the 2 hours. How do you lot come up with this shit? As for Messi, well, he actually didn't play against Germany the day before. Probably should have, to be honest. But we move. 06 semi-finals. France 1, Portugal 0. So Ronaldo here was up against the French side who only conceded 1 goal from open play on the way to reaching the final. And even then, guess what? It was CR17 ahead of Figo, ahead of Henry, and even ahead of Zidane, who walked away with the man of the match, switching from wing to wing and ripping apart both Willy Sagnol and Eric Abidal. And yet, somehow this performance is now also used against him, cause this was a knockout game, you see, and he didn't score. Helmets. 2010 last 16. Spain 1, Portugal 0. So Ronaldo's only knockout game in the South Africa tournament was against eventual winners and one of the greatest sides of all time, who actually conceded 0 goals in the entire knockout stages that tournament. And if you're someone who's using Cristiano not scoring in this game against him, you need professional help. Just like Messi did in his last 16 game against Mexico again 2 days prior. A team who couldn't even prevent fucking Shabalala from scoring. But they did prevent Messi, just saying. And while Ronaldo's tournament ended there, Messi and Cole did go on to the quarters to play Germany. And did Messi score? Did he fuck? Did he even play? Did he fuck? Oh wait, checks notes. Turns out he did play. Damn. I thought I had a good memory. 2014. So Ronaldo and Portugal were booted out in the first round of this tournament, so he didn't play in any actual knockout games, though it may be worth mentioning that his latter 2 group games were technically knockout matchups. And how did he fare? Well, he produced the best cross of the tournament in virtually the last kick of the game, which kept his country in the competition for another few days against the US, and then ended his miserable injury-laden campaign with a goal against Ghana. But still, no knockout games, let alone goals. Meanwhile, Messi played in 4, count 'em, 4 knockout games that World Cup, finding the net in precisely 0. But come on, as much as this is a bit of a parody video, I just don't feel good being this shallow. So let's go through those 4 games for some context. So Messi's first knockout tie of 2014 was against Switzerland. And you know what? Jekyll and Hyde started off really strong, but heavily struggled towards the end and actually was hyperventilating at one point. Still though slipped Di Maria through, fair enough. Second game was against Belgium. Very average, barely involved. But I could say the same thing about the entire Argentinian team that game, to be honest. Still won though. Next came Holland. And I won't lie, this was possibly the worst game of that World Cup, and I remember watching Nigeria versus Iran. And as for the final, the less said, the better. 2018 last 16, Uruguay 2, Portugal 1. Okay, fair enough. This is the first knockout game of CR7's career where you can kind of use against him, because while Uruguay were a decent side, they weren't exactly Spain 2010 or England 2006. Yeah, he couldn't stop his country from getting eliminated. Fair, that's one game. As for Messi, well, not much else to say. He did all against France, but since everything Argentina do as a rule of thumb must go through him, he was inevitably going to bag an assist or two, especially if it's a high scoring game against a team who open up and give you space. No one ever heard that before. Trust me, don't trust stats. Qatar 2022. Here we go. The year where World Cup knockout goals became the be-all and end-all of all mankind. So, in Portugal's last 16 tie against Switzerland, Ronaldo had a few minutes in the end and scored an offside goal. Again, a nothing appearance really, can't use against him. And similarly, in Portugal's quarterfinals loss to Morocco, Captain Chris made another subs appearance from the bench where he couldn't really have done much. But this is where all these little kiddies pipe up. So, if you're one of those who genuinely think that Ronaldo coming on for 40 minutes and failing to score against Morocco is something you can use against him, as it was a World Cup knockout game and he didn't score, let me put it like this. Ronaldo at the time was in the worst form of his life, had no pre-season, was already lacking huge confidence from being benched at United, had personal and professional problems all year, got benched again in the World Cup, was 37 years old and in all-round bad shape physically and mentally, and you expect him to come off the bench and rescue the game against the best defense of the tournament in Morocco after they'd already taken the lead and decided to sit back? Well, considering he is the greatest big game player of all time, I don't blame you. But for those not willing to admit that and still wish to use CR7 failing to score against Morocco against him, well, this example is specifically for you, specially produced lemons. If so, well then you should also crucify Messi for not doing the same against Poland. Cause cast your minds back. In Argentina's third game against Poland, they needed to win to ensure qualification. And well, Messi did precisely nothing at 0-0, but then was gifted a penalty and fucked that up too. But then, after his teammate took the pressure off him by putting Argentina ahead and forcing the Polish to open up, guess what? Messi began to ball like he was prime fucking Xavi. And by the way, this was a Messi who was 2.5 years younger than Ronaldo, in hot form coming into the tournament, was facing a side who were nowhere near as defensively solid as Morocco, and yet he couldn't rescue his country. And yet, a handful of penalties and some questionable officiating later, nobody remembers that. And yet, it's Ronaldo who will forever be crucified for not doing the same in exponentially more difficult circumstances. How does it go again? Oh yes, perspective, people. And then of course, Messi goes and scores a goal against the mighty Australia, one technically illegal rebound, and 3 penalties he had all to do with winning, and all of a sudden, World Cup knockout goals become everything. How do you lot manage to walk without falling over? So to conclude... Oh, by the way, one thing. You see, due to the nature of the kind of player Messi is, he quite often leads the chart in 2 specific stats. Most take-ons completed, but also the highest number of times dispossessed. It usually goes like this. Receive ball, run past 1, run past 2, lose it to the 3rd. And basically rinse repeat until you find enough space to either shoot or thread it to a teammate. So yeah, completing the most dribbles doesn't necessarily make his performances great, but adversely, losing the ball the most often doesn't necessarily make his performances bad. This is just him. It's a messy predicament if you like. Anyways, back to the summary. So, to conclude, here's a quick review of why Ronaldo has never scored a World Cup knockout goal. 2006 versus Holland, injured early, subbed off subsequently, while Messi played Mexico and did fuck all. 2006 versus England, up against a team who kept 4 out of 5 clean sheets and had a back 4 of Neville, Ferdinand, Terry and Ashley Cole, and he was still Portugal's best player. 2006 versus France, up against a team who only conceded 1 goal from open play until the final, and despite not scoring scoring, he was still the man of the match. 2010 versus Spain, up against eventual winners and one of the greatest sides of all time who conceded 0 goals in the entire knockout stages that tournament, while Messi again played Mexico and failed to score. 2018 versus Uruguay, fair enough, he underperformed, and so did Messi against France. 2022, 2 helpless appearances from the bench where the games were already signed, sealed and delivered before he'd come on, while Messi scored 1 against Minnows Australia, 1 technically illegal rebound, and 3 penalties his teammates won for him. And you know what, my friend? If that's what it takes to be your GOAT, I'm sure I speak for CR7 himself when I say, keep your application, we don't want it. Boom! And that is that, people, and as always, you keep rolling.